My brother was dying when he grabbed my wrist and tried to warn me about his only son. He couldn't speak, so I put a pen in his shaking hand. For nearly a minute, he fought to write 2 words. When I read them, my stomach turned cold. Not Kale. Kale was his son. Before I could ask what he meant, the monitor beside his bed began screaming. Please, before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening from today. Less than 24 hours earlier, I had been sitting alone in my kitchen in Tucson, Arizona, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold. My wife, Marlo, had been gone almost 2 years, and mornings were still the worst. Then my phone rang. The woman introduced herself as a hospice nurse in Boise, Idaho. Mr. Hartwick, I'm calling about your brother, Hollis. He's fading quickly. He's been asking for you. If you want to see him, you should come now. I was on the road less than 20 minutes later. Hollis was 4 years older than me, but after our father disappeared when I was 12, he became more than a brother. At 16, he took a job after school and helped raise me. Hollis had spent most of his life protecting me. Now I was afraid I wouldn't reach him in time. I reached Boise the following afternoon. A nurse led me to room 214. I thought I was prepared. I wasn't. My brother had always been broad-shouldered and strong. The man beneath those blankets looked like a shadow of him. His breathing came in shallow pulls. But when I stepped beside the bed, his eyes opened. Hey, big brother, I whispered. His hand moved toward mine. I took it, and suddenly his fingers clamped around my wrist. I'm here. Whatever you need, I'm here. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then his eyes shifted desperately toward the bedside table. I saw a notepad and pen and placed them in front of him. His hand shook so badly, the pen slipped once. Slowly, painfully, he wrote N-O-T. He stopped to breathe, then forced himself to continue. K-A-L-E. I stared at the page. Not Kale? His eyes locked onto mine. What I saw wasn't confusion, it was fear. Hollis, what about Kale? He tightened his grip on my sleeve. Is Kale in trouble? Hollis shook his head. Did Kale do something? His eyes widened. His mouth opened, but the monitor suddenly changed. A sharp alarm filled the room. Nurses rushed in and pulled me away as his breathing became erratic. I stood in the hallway holding the yellow note while they worked on him. 10 minutes later, a nurse told me Hollis had stabilized, but was unconscious again. I looked down at those 2 words, not Kale. I had known my nephew for 41 years. Kale was successful, polite, respected, and, as far as I knew, devoted to his father. Hollis had always spoken proudly of him. So why had my brother used what might have been his final moment of clarity not to say goodbye, but to warn me about his own son? And what frightened me most was the possibility that whatever Hollis was trying to stop had already begun. The next morning I woke beside Hollis's bed with the note still folded in my shirt pocket. I had read those 2 words so many times during the night that I could see them with my eyes closed. Not Kale. Hollis drifted in and out of consciousness. But every time I tried to ask what he meant, he was too weak to answer. Around 10:30, a nurse checked his medication. His son should be here soon, she said. He's been calling every few hours. He seems like a very caring man. I didn't tell her what was in my pocket. At 11, quick footsteps approached the room. A man appeared in the doorway carrying an overnight bag. Kale. I hadn't seen my nephew in almost 5 years. He crossed the room and hugged me. Uncle Owen, thank God you're here. Then he went straight to his father. Hey, Dad. It's me. Hollis opened his eyes. I expected relief. Instead, his entire body tightened beneath the blanket. His fingers curled around the bed rail, and for 1 second, panic crossed his face. Kale either didn't notice or pretended not to. He took his father's hand and talked softly about the drive, work, and weather. Within minutes, he was thanking nurses by name. Everyone seemed to like him. That bothered me because I liked him too. By lunchtime, I was questioning myself. Maybe Hollis had been confused by medication. Maybe not Kale meant something else. Maybe exhaustion was turning fear into a story that wasn't there. Kale and I sat in the family lounge with coffee. He asked about my health, retirement, and how I was managing since Marlo died. Nothing about him felt threatening. Dad talked about you all the time, he said. He always said you were the one person he could count on. And he was always proud of you, I replied. Kale looked down. I just wish I'd done more. For a moment, I hated myself for suspecting him. Then we returned to Hollis's room. Kale adjusted his father's blanket. Don't worry about anything, Dad, he said. I've got everything under control. Hollis's eyes opened. He turned his face away from Kale. It was a tiny movement, but his breathing changed. Then his eyes found mine. Fear again. Not confusion. Fear. He lifted one hand toward me, but Kale leaned closer. You need something? Hollis immediately lowered it. A cold feeling moved through me. That evening, Kale ordered dinner and spent an hour telling stories about fishing trips and Christmases at the cabin. Every few minutes I caught myself relaxing. Then I would touch the note in my pocket and remember Hollis's face. Around 7, Kale set down his coffee. Uncle Owen, there's something we should talk about before Dad gets any worse. I watched him carefully. What is it? He glanced toward Hollis's room. His affairs, the house, the cabin. There are a few documents Dad wanted taken care of while he still can. My fingers tightened around my cup. What kind of documents? Kale smiled, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Nothing you need to worry about. I just need your help making sure everything goes where Dad wants it to go. In my pocket, the note suddenly felt heavier. Not Kale. All day I'd been trying to convince myself my brother was confused. Now his fear, Kale's arrival, and the sudden talk of documents had formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. And for the first time I wondered if Hollis hadn't been warning me about something Kale had already done. Maybe he was warning me about what Kale intended to do next. By the next afternoon, I knew Hollis was afraid of Kale. What I still didn't understand was why. Kale gave me the first piece of that answer over coffee in the family lounge. He lowered his voice and said, Dad's affairs are more complicated than I made them sound. Complicated how? Mostly the cabin. A few accounts. Things that need to be settled before people start fighting over them. What people? He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Brienne. I hadn't heard my niece's name in years. She was Kale's younger sister, raising 2 children in Oregon and teaching at a community college. What does Brienne have to do with this? I asked. Kale sighed. I hate saying this about my own sister, but she hasn't been there for Dad. Not when the cancer came back, not after the second surgery. Half the time, she doesn't even return his calls. He didn't sound angry. That was what made him convincing. He sounded disappointed. Dad always protected her, he continued, even when she didn't deserve it. I remembered Brienne as stubborn and independent, but not cruel. Still, families changed. People drifted apart. Does she know how bad he is? I asked. Kale looked into his coffee. She knows he's sick. That's not what I asked. His eyes lifted to mine. No. She doesn't know he's this close to the end. I stared at him. Why haven't you told her? Because the minute she hears Dad is dying, she'll come here and turn everything into a fight. Over what? This time he answered immediately. Money. The word sat between us. Kale leaned closer. Dad wanted a few things handled before she got involved, especially the cabin. He told you that? More than once. I felt the folded note against my chest. Not Kale. Then, why do you need me? I asked. Kale gave me a small smile. Because Dad trusts you. If you sign as a witness on a few documents, nobody can claim later that I pressured him. There it was. Sign. I kept my face still. Bring me the papers tomorrow. I'll read them. Relief flashed across his face before he hid it. Of course. That night, I sat beside Hollis while rain tapped softly against the hospice window. Kale says Brienne hasn't been here, I whispered. Hollis opened his eyes. He says you wanted the cabin handled before she found out how sick you are. His brow tightened. I leaned closer. Is that true? Hollis tried to shake his head. The movement was weak, but I saw it. Then he looked toward the door, as if he were afraid someone might be listening. Before I could ask more, a quiet voice behind me said, Your brother has been trying to tell people something for days. I turned. Esther, the elderly woman from across the hall, sat in her wheelchair near the doorway. What do you mean? I asked. She glanced toward the corridor, then rolled closer. These walls are thin. At night your brother talks in his sleep. My pulse quickened. What does he say? Mostly that he's running out of time. She paused, and that he should have fixed something sooner. I looked at Hollis. His eyes were closed again. Fixed what? I don't know. Esther studied me for a moment. But I know what fear sounds like. Then she asked, Has his son asked you to sign anything? Every muscle in my body tightened. Not yet. Her expression changed. Not yet is not the same as no. I told her Kale planned to bring documents in the morning. Esther gripped the arms of her wheelchair. Then listen carefully. Don't sign a single page until someone who has nothing to gain reads every word. You don't even know Kale. No, she said. But I've lived long enough to recognize urgency disguised as responsibility. I thought about Kale hiding Hollis's condition from Brienne. About the cabin. About his need for my signature. About Hollis shaking his head. For the first time, these weren't separate details. They were connected. And one question frightened me more than all the others. If Kale truly wanted to honor his father's wishes, why did he need his sister kept away until the papers were signed? I barely slept that night. Hollis's note and Esther's warning kept circling in my mind. Don't sign anything. By sunrise, I had made one decision. If Kale put a document in front of me, I would read every word before my name went near it. Around 9, Esther stopped me across the hall and lowered her voice. There is something else. Before you arrived, your brother woke up calling for Brienne. Twice. Then he said, "Tell her I'm sorry." A chill moved through me. Kale had spent 2 days convincing me Brienne had abandoned her father. Yet Hollis had been calling for her while Kale kept her from knowing he was dying. Did you tell Kale? I tried. He said medication makes dying people say things they don't mean. An hour later, Kale arrived, carrying a leather portfolio. Morning, Uncle Owen. I brought those papers. We sat in a small conference room. He spread several documents across the table, then slid one toward me. This is the important one. It concerned the cabin. The language was dense, but the result was clear. Kale would receive broad authority over the property. Dad wants me to handle it after he's gone, he said. Keep Brienne from turning it into a fight. I looked up. Was there an earlier plan? Kale blinked. What do you mean? A previous will or trust? For the first time, his expression slipped. Dad simplified things. Then I'd like to see what he simplified. Silence. Uncle Owen, Dad is dying. I'm trying to prevent problems. Then there shouldn't be a problem showing me the old documents. His smile returned. But the warmth was gone. I'll see what I can find. He gathered the papers and stepped outside to take a call. I went straight to Hollis. I need you to answer without speaking. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no. His eyes focused on mine. Did you ask Kale to change what happens to the cabin? 2 taps. No. My pulse jumped. Did Kale ask you to sign something? 1 tap. Yes. Did you want to sign it? 2 taps. No. Hollis grabbed my hand. His eyes shifted toward the door. His lips moved. I leaned closer. He forced out one weak word. Lawyer. Years earlier, Hollis had mentioned Marjorie Kestrel, the attorney who handled his estate. I found an old number and called from the hallway. I explained that Kale had brought documents involving the cabin. Her tone changed immediately. Has anyone signed them? No. She exhaled. Good. Keep it that way. I stopped walking. Why? I can't disclose your brother's full estate plan without authorization, but Hollis made significant revisions 6 months ago. Did those revisions leave the cabin to Kale? A pause. No. I looked through the window. Kale was pacing beside his car, phone pressed to his ear. So if Kale told me Dad wanted him to control the cabin, then what he told you does not match the plan in my office. My mouth went dry. Why did Hollis change it? That is something I would rather explain in person, but your brother was very deliberate. He did not make those changes casually. Before hanging up, she added, Owen, don't let anyone use his condition to create a new plan at the last minute. I returned to Hollis's room with my heart pounding. Until then, I had suspicion. Now, I had confirmation. Kale wasn't simply interpreting his father's wishes differently. He was trying to move paperwork forward that contradicted them. Through the doorway, I saw him returning, smiling at a nurse, as if nothing was wrong. For the first time, I didn't see the charming nephew everyone trusted. I saw a man who needed something from a dying father and was running out of time to get it. I didn't confront Kale about the lawyer. Not yet. If he was lying, I wanted to know how far he was willing to carry the lie when he believed I still trusted him. I found him that afternoon in the family lounge, answering emails on his laptop. He smiled when I sat down. Everything okay? I spoke with Marjorie Kestrel. His fingers stopped above the keyboard. Only for a second. Then he slowly closed the laptop. Dad's lawyer? She told me Hollis changed his estate plan 6 months ago. I expected denial. Instead, Kale leaned back and sighed. I figured she'd tell you eventually. That answer caught me off guard. You knew? Of course I knew. Dad and I argued about it for months. About the cabin? About money? There was no charm in his voice now, just fatigue. I let the silence work on him. Finally, he continued. A few years ago, I invested in a business with a friend. It failed. Dad helped me recover. How much? Does it matter? If it made him rewrite his estate? Yes. Kale looked toward the window. Then another opportunity came along. That one didn't work either. And Hollis covered that loss too? His jaw tightened. He helped his son. Fathers do that. How many times? Kale didn't answer. I thought of Hollis's old pickup, the shirts he wore until the collars frayed, the way he saved everything because he had grown up with nothing. My brother wasn't a man who threw money at bad decisions. How much did he give you, Kale? Enough that he eventually decided I'd had enough. He gave a bitter laugh. Brienne made sure of that. There it was again. Whenever the questions moved too close to him, his sister somehow entered the story. What did Brienne do? She convinced Dad I was irresponsible. Did she make your investments fail? His eyes hardened. You don't understand what happened. Then explain it. He stared at me for several seconds. I was trying to build something. Every time I got close, something went wrong. Partners lied. Markets changed. Deals collapsed. Dad stopped seeing the effort. All he saw were the losses. And 6 months ago, he changed the estate. Kale nodded. Because Brienne got in his head. I knew that wasn't what Marjorie had implied. But I didn't correct him. What exactly did he change? You'll find out soon enough. Why not tell me now? Kale stood. Because my father is dying, Uncle Owen, and I'm tired of defending myself while everyone acts like I'm waiting for him to die. Then he walked out. 20 minutes later, I was alone with Hollis. His eyes opened when I sat beside him. I talked to Kale. His expression changed immediately. He told me about the failed investments. Hollis closed his eyes. Did you keep giving him money? 1 tap against my hand. Yes. Did he pay it back? 2 taps. No. Is that why you changed the estate? Hollis hesitated, then tapped once. Yes. I leaned closer. Were you afraid he'd lose the cabin too? Hollis opened his eyes and looked directly at me. Then he gripped my wrist. His lips began moving. What is it? I whispered. He forced air through his throat. 2. I moved closer. 2 what? His fingers tightened painfully around mine. Late. I froze. What's too late, Hollis? His eyes filled with frustration. Did Kale already take something? His breathing quickened. Did he move money? He tried to answer, but his strength disappeared. His hand slipped from my wrist and fell onto the blanket. A nurse entered and checked his oxygen while I stepped back. 2 words had changed the entire problem. Until that moment, I thought Hollis was trying to prevent Kale from taking control after his death. But too late meant something else. It meant whatever my brother feared might not be waiting in the future. Part of it may already have happened. And if Kale needed the cabin badly enough to lie to me, hide his father's condition from Brienne, and bring new documents into a hospice room, then I needed to know what he was trying to save himself from before Hollis ran out of time to tell me. Hollis's words stayed with me all night. Too late for what? Had Kale already taken something no document could bring back? The next morning, I found Esther sitting by her window with a crossword puzzle closed in her lap. When I told her what Hollis had said, she became very still. There is something I haven't told you, she said. Your nephew. I've seen him before. My stomach tightened. Where? Esther took a breath. About 15 years ago, after my husband died, I was alone and terrible with money. Then a polite young man started helping me understand insurance and investments. Kale? I didn't know his name then. Yesterday I heard a nurse call him Kale Hartwick, and I remembered. She opened a drawer and removed a worn notebook. Inside were names and dates. Her finger stopped beside one entry. Kale Hartwick. Why is his name there? Esther looked down. Because he introduced me to a man who promised to invest my savings safely. Kale never took my check. He was just the person who made me trust the man who did. What happened? I lost almost $60,000. Did the police investigate? There wasn't enough to prove Kale had done anything illegal. He always stayed one step away from the money. That sentence chilled me. Are you certain it was him? Certain enough to warn you, not certain enough to ruin a man's life without proof. I returned to Hollis's room. Kale was standing beside the bed, scrolling through his phone. Do you know a woman named Esther Peberly? I asked. His thumb stopped for half a second. Should I? She's across the hall. She remembers you. He shrugged. I've met thousands of people through insurance. She says you introduced her to an investment advisor 15 years ago. And? She lost $60,000. Kale slipped his phone into his pocket. If you're accusing me, say it. I'm asking whether you remember her. I don't control what adults do with their money. The answer came too quickly. Did your father know about it? His jaw tightened. You should spend your time with Dad instead of listening to confused old women. Then he walked out. I waited until his footsteps disappeared and sat beside Hollis. Did you know Kale was introducing people to investments? Hollis opened his eyes. One tap. Yes. Did you confront him? One tap. Did he stop? Hollis stared at me. 2 taps. No. My chest tightened. Is that what you meant by too late? Hollis didn't tap. His eyes filled with tears. Whatever the answer was, it was bigger than Esther. That afternoon I called Marjorie again. I told her about Esther and the failed investments Kale had admitted to. She was silent for several seconds. Owen, I can't discuss privileged conversations without Hollis's authorization, but I can tell you this. 6 months ago, your brother didn't come to my office because of one bad investment. Then why? Because he had started seeing a pattern. What kind of pattern? Repeated requests for money. Explanations that changed. Loans that were never repaid. And concerns involving people outside the family. I looked through the glass toward Hollis. Was he afraid of Kale? Marjorie paused. Yes. If Kale brings new documents, she continued, call me before anyone signs. Hollis changed his estate to limit Kale's control, not expand it. An hour later, I saw Kale at the far end of the hallway, speaking quietly into his phone. He didn't see me. I know, he whispered. I'm handling it. A pause. No, nothing has been signed yet. Then he turned and saw me. The call ended instantly. Work problem? I asked. Something like that. He smiled and walked past me. Esther's lost savings. Kale's failed ventures. Hollis's unpaid loans. The rewritten estate. The papers Kale wanted signed. The secret phone call. The pieces now formed a pattern. But one thing still bothered me. If Kale was only desperate for money, why had Hollis looked genuinely afraid of him? And why had my brother said it was already too late? That evening, Esther showed me the rest of her notebook. 7 names were listed beneath Kale's. Widows and retirees, she said. People who trusted the same circle. The ones I know about lost money too. One victim could be a bad investment. 7 suggested something else. Suddenly, Hollis's warning felt different. He hadn't written, don't sign. He hadn't written, save the cabin. He had written, a person's name, not Kale. Whatever Hollis had discovered, he wasn't warning me about one piece of property. He was warning me about the man trying to control it. The next morning, Kale stopped pretending there was plenty of time. He arrived just after 10 carrying the leather portfolio, and beside him was a man I had never seen. Mid-50s, brown suit, silver briefcase. Kale introduced him before I could ask. Uncle Owen, this is Daniel Fletcher. He's a notary. Dad wanted to finish a few things while he's still lucid. Still lucid. I looked through the doorway at Hollis. His eyes were open, but even from the hallway, I could see how weak he had become. What things? I asked. Kale smiled. The documents we discussed. You said you'd show me the previous estate plan first. His smile tightened. I couldn't locate a complete copy. Marjorie probably has it. He didn't know I had already spoken to her twice. I kept my face neutral. Then let's see what you brought. We entered Hollis's room. The moment my brother saw the portfolio, his breathing changed. Daniel placed his briefcase on a chair. Mr. Hartwick, I'm only here to witness signatures. If at any point you're uncomfortable or don't understand something, we stop. Is that clear? Hollis looked at me instead of answering. Kale stepped closer to the bed. Dad, it's the paperwork we talked about. Hollis's fingers curled against the blanket. Daniel began arranging documents on the rolling table. I picked up the first one. The cabin. Kale would receive broad authority to manage it. The second document made my stomach tighten. It granted him authority over several financial accounts if Hollis became unable to manage them himself. The third concerned insurance proceeds. The fourth gave Kale discretion over financial decisions during incapacity. I read the first page again, then the second. Kale shifted behind me. It's standard language. Then you won't mind if I read it. Of course not. I kept going. His name appeared everywhere. Authority, discretion, control. This wasn't a son trying to preserve a cabin. This was a man trying to put himself between Hollis and nearly everything Hollis still owned. You told me this was mostly about the cabin. Kale exhaled. It is. I lifted the document. Then why does this give you access to financial accounts? Access isn't ownership. I know the difference. His eyes narrowed. Apparently Marjorie has been filling your head with things. That was the first time he admitted he knew I'd spoken to her. She didn't need to. I can read. Daniel looked from Kale to me. Perhaps we should slow down. There's nothing to slow down, Kale said. My father asked for this. I turned toward the bed. Then let's ask him. Kale's face changed. Uncle Owen. I ignored him. I moved beside Hollis and took his hand. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no, just like yesterday. Do you understand? 1 tap. Kale stepped forward. He's heavily medicated. Daniel raised a hand. Let him answer. I looked into my brother's eyes. Hollis, do you want to sign these documents today? His fingers moved against my palm. Tap, tap. No, nobody spoke. Kale stared at his father. Dad, listen to me. These are the documents we discussed. The cabin? The accounts, remember? Hollis slowly turned his head toward him. Then, with visible effort, he shook it. No. Daniel immediately began gathering the papers. I can't witness anything under these circumstances. Kale's composure cracked. He has terminal cancer. He's exhausted. 5 minutes ago, he understood perfectly. 5 minutes ago, I hadn't asked him anything, Daniel replied. Kale looked at me. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I'm making sure a dying man isn't signing something he doesn't want. I'm his son. Then why are you afraid to wait for his lawyer? Silence. Why are you afraid to let Brienne see these papers? His eyes hardened. Leave my sister out of this. Why? Because she hasn't earned the right to walk in at the last minute and interfere. You mean the sister you haven't told that her father is dying? That landed. Daniel stopped packing his briefcase. Kale's face went pale, then red. You don't understand our family. Then help me understand it. Call her. No. The answer came so quickly that even Kale seemed to hear the mistake. I stared at him. Why not? Because Dad doesn't need drama right now. I almost laughed. You're standing beside his deathbed with a notary and documents giving you control of his money, but calling his daughter would create drama? Kale stepped closer. His voice dropped. You need to trust me. I did. He went still. I continued. That's why this bothers me so much. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was Hollis's oxygen machine. Then I took out my phone. If everything you've told me about Brienne is true, she can confirm it herself. Kale reached toward my arm. Don't. 1 word. Quiet. Instinctive. Desperate. I looked at his hand, then at his face. Why? He pulled back. Because once she gets involved, everything becomes harder. Harder for whom? He didn't answer. I searched my contacts until I found Brienne's number. Kale watched every movement of my thumb. For the first time since he'd arrived, there was no smile, no patient voice, no grieving son performance. There was only fear. Not the fear of losing his father. The fear of losing control. I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. Kale whispered, Owen, hang up, 3 times. Then a woman's voice answered. Hello? I looked directly at Kale. Brienne, it's Uncle Owen. I'm sitting beside your father. There was a pause. Then she asked one question that told me immediately. Kale had lied about far more than money. Why? What happened to Dad? The woman on the phone went silent after I told her where I was. Then Brienne said, Uncle Owen, Dad isn't in hospice. Kale told me he was home recovering. I looked at Kale. Brienne, I said, your father has been in hospice for days. The nurses don't expect him to have much time. No. I talked to Kale 3 nights ago. He said Dad was stable. He told me not to fly out because visitors were overwhelming him. Kale stepped toward me. Give me the phone. I moved away. Brienne heard him. Kale, you're there? Brienne, calm down. You told me Dad was getting better. I said he was stable. You told me not to come. Because every time you come around, you upset him. Silence. Then Brienne said, "Put Dad on the phone." I carried the phone to Hollis and switched on the speaker. "Hollis, Brienne is here." His eyes opened immediately. "Dad?" Her voice broke. Hollis made a sound somewhere between a breath and a sob. "Dad, I'm coming. Do you hear me? I'm getting on the first flight I can find." His fingers tightened around mine. One tap. "Yes." I looked at Kale. For 2 days he had told me Brienne had abandoned their father. But Hollis was crying because he had finally heard his daughter's voice. "I tried calling last week," Brienne continued. "Kale said you were sleeping. I sent messages. He said he'd read them to you." Hollis looked toward Kale. "Did you get my messages, Dad?" 2 taps. "No." Brienne went silent. "Kale, what did you do?" "Nothing. Dad was sick. I was protecting him from stress. By keeping my calls from him. By managing a situation you weren't here to manage. You made sure I wasn't there." "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid," I said. "What you were trying to avoid was Brienne arriving before those papers were signed." Kale turned on me. "You have no idea what you're talking about." I lifted the document giving him financial authority. "Then explain this to your sister." Brienne's voice changed. "What document?" "He brought a notary this morning. The papers would give him control over the cabin, financial accounts, insurance proceeds, and other decisions." "Dad agreed to that?" I asked him. He said no. Kale's voice hardened. "Dad is medicated, Owen. You're turning confused movements into whatever answer you want." Daniel spoke from the doorway. "That's not what I observed." Kale spun toward him. "Nobody asked you. You brought me here to witness voluntary signatures." "I won't do that," after the signer clearly refused. Brienne said, "I'm booking a flight now." "Don't," Kale said. Brienne asked, "Why?" "Because there's nothing you can do here. He's my father, and I've been the one dealing with everything while you built your life in Oregon. You told me he was." "Okay. Because I knew what would happen if you came back." "What would happen?" Kale didn't answer. I did. "You'd see the papers. Stop pretending this is some conspiracy. Then tell us why the cabin has to be transferred now." "Because Dad wanted it handled. He just said he didn't. He doesn't understand what he's saying." Hollis suddenly struck the bed rail with his palm. The sound was weak, but it stopped us all. His eyes were fixed on Kale. Slowly, he lifted one trembling finger and pointed toward the door. Kale stared at him. "Dad?" Hollis pointed again. "Out." Kale looked wounded for a moment, then panic replaced it. He grabbed the portfolio. "Fine. Let Brienne come. Let everyone tear apart everything I've spent years trying to hold together." He headed for the door. I asked, "What falls apart if you don't get the cabin?" Kale stopped. Then he turned. And for the first time, the polished, patient son disappeared completely. "You think this is about a vacation house?" His voice shook with anger. "If I lose that property, everything falls apart." "What? Everything?" I asked. Kale seemed to hear his own words too late. His eyes shifted to Daniel, then Hollis. "Forget it." "No," I said. "I don't think I will." He walked out. A few seconds later, I heard the elevator doors close. Brienne was still on speaker. "Uncle Owen, what is happening?" I looked at Hollis. "I don't know yet. Get here as fast as you can." "I will." Then she lowered her voice. "And Owen? Don't let Kale be alone with Dad." I promised her I wouldn't. After the call ended, I unfolded the note Hollis had given me and placed it beside his hand. Not Kale. Until then, I thought it meant, don't trust Kale with the estate. Now I understood the warning was bigger. Kale didn't simply want the cabin. He needed it. And desperate men don't hide daughters, rush signatures, and lie beside a dying man's bed over sentimental property. Whatever was holding Kale's life together was tied to that cabin. Brienne was on her way to Boise now, and for the first time, Kale no longer controlled who knew what. When she walked through that hospice door, I suspected the story he'd spent months building was going to collapse. Brienne reached the hospice just before midnight. When she saw Hollis, she stopped in the doorway. "Dad." Hollis opened his eyes. Brienne crossed the room and took his hand. "I'm here. I'm sorry. I should have come sooner." Hollis shook his head. A tear slid toward his ear. He tapped her hand once. "Yes." Then he looked at me, and I understood. Whatever Kale had told us, Hollis did not blame his daughter. He had wanted her there. Hollis died the following evening with Brienne on one side of his bed and me on the other. Kale never came back. 3 days later, Brienne and I sat in Marjorie Kestrel's office while she opened Hollis's estate file. Kale arrived 10 minutes late with an attorney. Marjorie began with the cabin. 6 months earlier, Hollis had transferred it into a family trust. Neither child could sell it alone. Brienne and Kale had equal beneficial interests, but major decisions required an independent trustee's approval. Kale leaned forward. "That isn't what Dad wanted." Marjorie looked at him. "It is exactly what your father signed," she continued. Hollis had also removed Kale from several financial roles and placed restrictions on distributions from 2 investment accounts. Then she opened a second folder. "Your father left a written explanation." Kale's face changed. Marjorie read only the relevant portion. Hollis had documented years of loans to Kale, repeated promises of repayment, and explanations that stopped matching bank records. The final entry was dated 7 months earlier. Kale had asked Hollis to guarantee a large private loan using the cabin as security. Hollis refused. "How large?" Brienne asked. Marjorie looked at the document. $480,000. I stared at Kale. Suddenly his words in the hospice made sense. "If I lose that property, everything falls apart." "Who was the lender?" I asked. Marjorie slid a copy across the table. Brienne recognized the company name. Kale stood. "We're done here." His attorney touched his arm. "Sit down." Marjorie wasn't finished. Hollis had discovered that several payments he believed were business loans had been routed through companies connected to investment promoters Kale worked with. He had started asking where his money had really gone, and Kale had started pressuring him to stop asking. I thought of Esther. That afternoon, I showed Marjorie the notebook with the 7 names. She didn't make accusations. She made copies. 2 weeks later, one of those names led to another, then another. Several retirees had lost tens of thousands. In several cases, Kale had never received the victims' checks directly. He introduced them to advisors, reassured them when they became nervous, and disappeared when the investments collapsed. The pattern was almost identical to Esther's story. Investigators began requesting records. Bank transfers connected companies that had looked unrelated. Emails showed Kale discussing referral payments he had never disclosed to the people he introduced. Hollis's loans had not merely rescued failed businesses. Some had been used to cover obligations when angry investors demanded their money back. That was what too late meant. Hollis had realized too late that helping his son financially may have helped keep the scheme alive. Months later, civil claims were filed, followed by criminal charges connected to fraud and financial exploitation. Brienne and I didn't celebrate. My brother had spent his final months wondering whether protecting his son had only protected him from consequences. Kale eventually lost access to the trust distributions while the litigation moved forward. Assets were frozen. Several victims recovered portions of what they had lost. The cabin remained exactly where Hollis had intended it to remain, beyond Kale's ability to use it as an emergency exit. I kept the yellow note, not Kale. At first I had thought those words were about inheritance. Then I thought they were about the cabin. I finally understood they were about trust. Hollis knew he no longer had enough time to explain years of lies, loans, pressure, and fear. So he gave me the only warning he still had the strength to give. When the moment came to decide who should control what happened next, not Kale. Kale's legal problems took months to unfold, but the part I remember most happened after the investigators and lawyers stopped calling every day. Justice, I learned, is loud at first. Healing is much quieter. The following summer, Brienne asked me to meet her and the children at Hollis's cabin. I almost said no. For months, that place had felt less like a family home than evidence in a case. But Hollis had protected it for a reason, and letting Kale poison our memories of it would give him one more thing he didn't deserve. So I went. When I arrived, Brienne's children were running along the dock while she stood on the porch holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Dad used to sit right there every morning," she said, pointing to an old chair. "And complain about the mosquitoes?" I replied. She laughed, then started crying. I put my arm around her. Later, she asked if I hated Kale. I thought about it. No, I hate what he did. That's different. Brienne looked toward the lake. Dad kept rescuing him because he thought one more chance would fix him. Hollis spent his life protecting people, I said. He learned too late that protecting someone from consequences can become another way of helping them hurt people. That evening, I received a letter forwarded by Esther's family. She had died peacefully several weeks earlier. Inside was one page in her careful handwriting. She said she was glad she had spoken, but she didn't want us to remember her as a victim who lost money. She wanted to be remembered as a woman who finally stopped being afraid to tell the truth. At the bottom, she had written one sentence: "Silence protects the wrong person more often than we realize." The next morning, Brienne and I drove into town and ordered a small wooden bench. We placed it near the lake where Hollis used to watch the sunset. On the back was a simple plaque: "Esther Peberly, she spoke when silence was easier." Brienne touched the plaque. "She saved this family." I shook my head. "She helped us listen. Your father saved it. He just needed someone to hear him." I reached into my wallet and unfolded the yellow note I had carried for months. The creases were nearly worn through. "Not Kale." At first, those words had terrified me. Then I thought they were about money. Later, I thought they were about the cabin. Standing there, I finally understood. They were Hollis's last act of protection. He couldn't explain years of loans, pressure, lies, and fear. He couldn't undo every mistake he'd made trying to save his son. But with the little strength he had left, he pointed me toward the truth. I folded the note and put it away. Behind me, Hollis's grandchildren were laughing on the dock. Brienne was calling them inside for dinner. The cabin was still standing. Our family was bruised and forever changed, but it was still a family. I used to think justice meant watching the person who hurt you lose everything. I don't anymore. Sometimes justice is simply making sure they don't get to take anything else. Hollis couldn't recover the money, the years, or the trust Kale destroyed. But he protected what remained, and in the end, that was enough.